Yeah, there he is. Rudy. What's up, man? Come on. Yeah, there he is. Rudy. All right, let me check what's up, what's man? Going on. Am I connected? Yeah, there. Okay, so let me invite. Come on, yeah, there he is. My buddy Rudy. To join. All right, let me check what's up, what's man? Going on. Am I connected? Yeah, there. Okay, so let me invite. Come on, yeah, there he is. My buddy Rudy. To join. All right, let me check what's up, what's man? Going on. Hey,
what's up, guys?
What's up, dude? How are you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm really good. And you?
Awesome. You know, I actually missed Chá Pedagógico, so I'm excited, man. It's been a while.
What's up, guys? Yeah,
we're taking a break, right?
Like, yeah, we're not Ross and Rachel, but we were on a break.
Exactly. So it happens once a year. It's kind of like going on holiday, right? But here we are back.
Yeah,
awesome.
We're all back, and hopefully everybody's going to have a great time with us with this new episode of Chá Pedagógico.
Oh yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Everyone that's been joining us. Hello.
Awesome.
I miss you guys as well. We're all back. Hopefully, we're gonna have a good time. Actually, you know, I think we've been using this platform recently to say about some very serious things, not only about linguistics or neuroscience, but also something that's been going on mainly here in Brazil, because we do have some people watching us from all over the country, from all over the world. And recently, I'd like to say something about what's been going on with the book taxation here in Brazil. Yeah, because I do think that this is a very important platform. It's a platform that we have. It's a stage that we both have.
Definitely.
To make a stand. And seriously, guys, I don't know if you've heard, but here in Brazil, mainly in the last couple of weeks, our governors or beloved politicians, not only from party A or B, but in general, they've been trying to pass a bill here in Brazil, book taxation. And books in Brazil are already very expensive. I don't know if you've been following not only Marcelo Consultoria, but also my personal account. A couple of years ago, I was trying to buy a book on grammaticalization, and here in Brazil, the book cost around $200-300. And in Europe, the same book, the very same book, costs around 90 euros or something like that. I understand that we have currency differences, but anyway, the difference.
But not that much, right?
But not that much, right?
So
books in Brazil are already very, very expensive. Why? Because there's some sort of movement trying to make people away from books. So guys, if you're watching us on YouTube, here on Instagram, if you're listening to us later on Spotify, please say no to this new book taxation that we're about to have in Brazil. The books are already very expensive. They're about to be even more expensive. So please say no to this new book taxation bill that they've been trying to pass here in Brazil.
Dude, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think it's outrageous. Because if you think about researchers, people, working on their theses and dissertations, and the regular Joe, the reader who wants to get some literature, it's really outrageous, because our Ministry of Economy actually said that books should be reserved for a certain elite in the country, which is so if we start talking about that, we're both going to be very angry, and we're going to start cursing a lot. So,
no, we're not going to do that, okay? It was just a stage. It was just a platform so everybody that's been watching us, listening to us, to also join the movement, note this new book, Taxation here in Brazil.
Definitely.
We're not going to be mad because this is the brand new episode, the first one of the semester.
Yeah.
And cheers because we haven't toasted yet, so cheers, bro.
Oh, yeah. Cheers, man. There you go. What kind of tea are you having now?
Yeah,
I'm not sure. Okay, I'm not sure what kind. It's kind of... Yeah.
It's a Brazilian black tea.
Awesome. I like it. I love it.
Yeah.
So let's get started, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
Let's just recap because I don't think people understand where we are right now because we started a couple of it was last week, last month, or a couple of weeks before, right?
The last episode of June that we started talking about.
Exactly. And then we decided to talk about the different learning styles. And I want to remind everyone that neuroscience says that, learning styles is not actually a thing. I just wanted to, make sure everybody was on the same page. We have a lot of evidence supporting the idea that we don't learn better according to our preferred learning style. There is no such thing. Actually, I wanted to read a very, very short quote from Paul Howard Jones, because guess what? He's going to be with us in a couple of weeks. So he says that the implicit assumption seems to be that because different regions of the cortex have crucial roles in visual, auditory, and sensory processing, learners should receive information in visual, auditory, and kinesthetic forms according to which part of the brain works better. But then he says the brain's interconnectivity makes such an assumption unsound, and reviews of educational literature and controlled laboratory studies fail to support this approach to teaching, meaning that we all have all the styles. Got it? And it really depends on what we're learning, what we're teaching. It's not like this guy is visual, I'm going to teach him in a visual way, he's going to learn better than, it doesn't work like that. We have a lot of evidence. But since we have a lot of books printed, using this learning styles framework and then visual activities, and people still use the categorization and everything, we decided to do this so we can bust the myth and also kind of, talk about the specifics, I guess, right?
Yeah, we're actually trying to shape this information because just complementing what Professor Howard Jones said in his book. And again, we're going to have him live on September the 7th. It's going to be our very first special Independence Day. So, but the thing is, the whole idea behind the learning styles is that to show that it's possible to have different approaches in the classroom. And again, Gardner, which is one of the biggest names related to learning styles, he never said in any of his books, in any of his studies, he never said that, guys, if you have this person with this specific profile, go for it, because this person is going to learn only using this kind of approach. He never mentioned that. He never said. He only categorized that. He only put him out. Put the categories out, like, okay, guys, so we do have these are tools. So what we presented us with was a toolbox. It was a toolbox, and he was just showing us, presenting the tools that we have. And today, because the first one we talked about the kinesthetic profile, now we selected the visual, which is, I think, the most common style that we have, right? I think everybody everybody, whenever we ask, what kind of learning style do you remember? I think the very first one is visual. Everybody's going to say visual.
And when people take the test, right? There's this internet test, like I think 80% of the world population is visual or something like that. I remember doing it with my students, and most of them were visual. And then I started, digging a little deeper and say, yeah, that's not how it works very well. But still, what does it say? It says that I think we place a lot of focus on images and photograph and stuff like that to learn. We like very much to have something visual, could be schematics or drawing, doodling, or taking pictures or whatever. So that does say something, right?
Yeah,
it's important. Yeah, and like
it's extremely important. Yeah, we're drinking at the same time. We're all the same.
I know.
The last 30 days that we were not having the show again.
Say something, right?
Yeah, I think we got out of sync.
But don't worry, it takes a couple of minutes. We'll be back.
But the thing is, yes, I'm going to. I think the very first thing that, as you said, people think of when we mention the visual style is drawings, doodling, etc. And we forget that everything around us, everything that's at our site, is going to be exploring this kind of style. Okay.
Yeah.
And once again, guys, we're not saying that we are only visuals, that we have people who are only visuals. We just selected this one, and we're going to focus on this. Okay. So. Okay. Yes. With that we have with body language and gestures and all these things. These are also working out the visual aspect of learning or of language development, because
definitely
the newborn is going to look, for example, at an adult, and this adult is getting a box that's on the floor, for instance, and putting this box on the top shelf.
Definitely.
So this movement from going to taking the box from the floor and putting it on the top shelf, this movement is going to make the baby develop his or her language, because it's not just the movement, because adults tend to have gestures with words. So probably the adult is going to be saying something like, okay, so let's put this box up here. And then what the baby is going to probably grasp. Normally they grasp first the content words. What are content words? Nouns, adjectives, verbs, etc. So we do have a very important content word here, which is box. And then the baby is going to associate, okay, so whenever this big giant person with a big head produces this specific pattern of sounds, probably the big giant person is referring to that object. And then the baby is going to start communicating by pointing. And then the baby, of course, will try to speak something, to say something, and the baby is not going to be able to do that yet. And the baby is going to be like pointing.
Exactly.
So this is a visual resource, not that the baby is going to actually produce something visual, but the visual is going to interfere directly in the language development of this baby.
Definitely. And if you look at some neuroscientific studies, so there was a great lecture by Professor, I think her last name is Buchheimer, UCLA, and then she talks about this longitudinal study of how neuroscience, of course. So I got my brain replica here, and then I love this thing, man. I'm gonna use it in every possible live anytime, right?
That is so cool.
So the thing is, we have the gray matter. which is actually the pink matter because of how you preserve the brain, and then it gets gray, right? But if you think about the surface of the gray matter, which is kind of thin, it gets thinner and thinner because we are maturing. So it actually what is growing inside the cortex, which is this pink area, is a lot of connections. So that's what we call white matter. So you're making a lot of connection. You need a lot of fat to insulate the axons of the neurons, right? To make things faster. So if you look at the regions that mature first, the occipital lobe matures very quickly because it deals with visual processing, because that's how kids navigate the world, you know? They need to be able to see things and actually, like you said, attach meaning to intention. So they look at their dads, you know, the big person in the room, you know, picking up a box, and they're going to see that things action, and they're going to have to attach something to that. And if the person says something, then they're going to put those things together and form a chunk. So the adult is lifting something, is saying something, and it's moving something. So that means something because I can see it, and I can also listen to the adult doing that, right? So that's very important. But we also have a lot of evidence showing, for example, you mentioned pointing, right? So intention, displaying that I want to go somewhere, I want to pick up something. That's probably how language evolved in the first place. Because before speech, the only resources we had basically were looking at things, and so we had a hominid, like a Homo erectus or whatever, and they couldn't make a lot of sounds, right? So they had to use their hands and gestures to share what they wanted to do, and that's why and this is the incredible part to wrap up, that's why when people are using sign language, you're going to see the very same activation of the same areas in the brain when you are looking at something, right? So when you understand reading, or you know, you're reading something from a piece of paper, and you are you know, trying to decode sign language, or when you're visualizing a scene, you're going to see a lot of activation in the back of your head. That's where your occipital lobe is, which is very cool. So that means that language probably most certainly started as sign language because it had to do with body language, it had to do with gestures, right?
Yes, and there's a $1 million, actually $1 million is not that much anymore, but $1 billion question that we have is,
well, oh man, give me $1 million. What the hell are you saying? It's a lot of money. Not much anymore. I'll take $1 million any day of the week, man.
whatever reality show that you're in right now, you get $1 million bucks. You know, so
yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's not something anymore. So the
true.
billion with the buck, $1 billion question here is, whichever came first then, the concept or the language. Because this is a question that we have in linguistics. Because there are some people who claim that, no, the concept came first. Because first you acquire the concept, and then you start pointing, and then only after 12 months that the baby is going to probably produce some word, you know.
Like babbling, basically, yeah.
Yeah, babbling come, and then you have, you know, the concept, pointing, babbling, a word, and then sentences, etc., etc. There are some other linguists who claim, no. The concept came, then the society or the world is going to be responsible for inserting this concept based on how the society is going to play off the gestures of the baby. So we do have this $1 billion question here. I'm not going to be crazy to say, no, this is the answer, because I don't have $1 billion. Actually, I don't have $10. Actually, I barely have a credit card. But you know, but now seriously, if you ask me, I strongly believe that concept is created first. because
Yes.
you're exposed to a lot of input. You have a lot of input, a lot of visual input. And then the brain of the baby is going to connect the dots. And then
Definitely,
again,
yeah.
because the baby will try to say something, and because the babies haven't get to that point yet, they're going to find another way of communicating, and then they are going to point, and that's why, or they're what we call it as pantomiming. This is pantomiming.
Exactly.
Pointing is pantomiming. So that's pointing comes after the concept is not fully developed, but we do have some first steps for the concept, and then comes the pointing. But we do have this $1 question.
Yeah. But you know, man, I agree with you, because if you think about how far animals can go in terms of thinking, because the $1 billion question is about thought and language, concept and language, right? And we understand from an evolutionary perspective that thought is there regardless of language. And you know, some guys say that there is a thought language, like Pinker and Mentalese and whatever, but you know, let's not get into that. But
they must Pinker must hate me so much.
Yeah,
so much.
Exactly. Pinker is very controversial nowadays, but he's saying a lot of crazy things. But anyway, what we know is that they're like basically three types or three major steps into language, like creating language, which is understanding indexes. So when you look at something that is evidence of something else, you can easily identify that, just like animals do. So if you look at, I don't know, you see water, so it must have rained, or I'm close to a river or a lake or something like that. So it's evidence because I know it relates to something. I see smoke, there must be fire somewhere, right? And then there is a transition, and that's an evolutionary transition that we know humans can do it. We are not sure about animals doing that very much, which is icons. So now it's almost like a symbol. It's not there yet, because it still resembles what you mean. So an icon is something that looks, you know, physically with whatever you are trying to represent, right? So Christianity and the cross, because Jesus, you know, so it's actually the physical representation of Jesus on the cross or something like that. Or if you go back thousands of years ago, you had Mother Earth, like an icon. It was like a you know, a very large lady with kind of bald, because it was the symbol of fertility and something like that. That's an icon, and humans can do that. But then the last step of this evolutionary path is creating symbols, because symbols, they don't resemble anything. They don't have to. So A is a symbol. It's a letter that means something, means a sound or many sounds in our language, in English and everything. So for you to be able to use those three things, you know, indexes, icons, and then symbols, that means that you were able to conceive them before. So you could create concepts in your mind before. And then, of course, when language came, when we evolved language, we just attached stuff. That's why language is all about symbology, right?
Yes, yes. And if you guys like to study in a more entertainingly way, you can watch the film, the first Da Vinci's Code. Yes.
Oh yeah, definitely.
The very beginning of the film, they talk about, actually Tom Hanks is giving a lecture on symbology and all these things. So
Professor Langdon, Robert Langdon.
Robert Langdon. Yeah, so watch the very first Da Vinci's Code with Tom Hanks. It's a very nice movie. It's very entertaining. In the very beginning, they mention this whole idea behind symbology, iconicity, and etc., etc. And going back a little bit to what I said in the very beginning of this episode, because we tend to forget that visual is not only related to illustrations or drawings, it's also related to whatever is happening in front of our eyes. And whatever is happening in front of a baby's eyes is extremely important, not only for the pointing aspect or the communicative aspect that later on is going to be developed into speech and a language and a speech, but also because of something that we call shared intentions. And I know that I mentioned this several times, but we never got into that. Of course, I'm not getting into that deeply into that today. But the whole thing behind shared intention is based on what Michael Tomasello has been studying and producing and analyzing and etc. observing. Because there is a very interesting experiment that he made several years ago, and one of his experiments was with his own son. And, he used his son.
Poor babies, you know.
Yes.
Linguists, they have babies to to test things, right?
Yes.
On them.
I think my daughter is watching me right now.
Yes, great.
Sophia.
So Sophia, be careful with your dad. He's gonna test stuff on you.
Daddy loves you so much, Sophia. Well, the thing is, one of his experiments is that there was a baby, and this baby was exposed to an adult, opening it wasn't a drawer, it was kind of a wardrobe. It was a very small wardrobe, okay? And this baby was, and then when the baby was exposed only once to this scenario, whenever the adult came with another object, the baby already connected the dots, like, okay, so I have to open that for the adult so the adult can put the object in the wardrobe. So this is shared intention. And this only happened after the baby was exposed at least once. And then we're going to, I'm mentioning Brunner here, because he also talks about experiencing things and being exposed to things. But the baby was exposed to that scenario, and the baby connected the dots like, okay, so whenever this big-headed dude comes in, he's going to open that door because he wants to put that object in his big hand in that place. So, okay, so let me open that. And the baby did that. So that's the whole point. That's actually the whole purpose of an action, because the action is going to make the baby connect the dots, and this dot connection or the dot connecting is going to evolve into communication later on, because when we communicate as we're doing right now, we are manipulating one another. I'm manipulating you, Andre. I'm sorry, brother, but I am manipulating you, and you've been manipulating me, and we've been manipulating all you guys that's been watching us.
We're putting things inside your brain. You know, that's cool.
That's the whole purpose of communication. And then when we are talking, as we are communicating, of course, we are sharing our intentions. Whenever, for instance, whenever you're talking to someone, and if you just, I don't know, if I do this to Andre now, Andre is going to look at me and he's going to be like, oh, I think I have 2 minutes left. So this
or
is a shared
maybe
intention that
peace out or whatever.
You know, why? Because we know each other for quite a while, and we have this alignment of intentions.
Definitely.
And this is only going to happen through visual aspects, through the gift of sight.
Yes, and dude, I just want to go back to Anna's comment here before I mention anything. But she says that it makes me think of how we use visual resources to trigger previous knowledge when we teach in the classroom. It's more definitely. I think using visual cues to trigger anything is actually a brilliant idea. Like I am a big fan of activating schemata in the brain before we start teaching, because then you make sure that the students are on the same page, right? Or at least you try to bring them to the same page so that you can start teaching new content, right? And I think the very simple way you can do it is just show them a picture that will relate to whatever you want them to activate. So maybe it's a situation they have to remember how to use verbs in the past. So maybe you show up a comic or something that somebody did something just for them to be there. I think it's great. And as you were saying, man, shared intention has a lot to do with the social brain and the mirror neuron system, right?
Yeah.
Because I was watching this researcher, Naomi Eisenberger, and they did a very cool experiment showing that social pain is actually felt the same way as physical pain in the brain, right? And sometimes even more. So if you lose someone you loved, if you broke up, with somebody you loved, if you were rejected by someone, that actually hurts in the brain. Because our brains evolved to learn by observing others. And then we have a lot of neuroscientific evidence showing that. And the most recent development of neuroscience is the so-called mirror neuron system, right? Which is basically, so again, I'm going to show you my brain.
So, dude, you sound like Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, remember the second movie, right? I love that scene, man. I'm going to show you my brain. But so the thing is, this is the parietal lobe. This is the right hemisphere, the parietal lobe. And then you have the frontal and the parietal lobe where they meet. It's basically the somatosensory cortex and the premotor cortex. So they have to do with movement and sensations, right? And then that's the coolest thing, man. So a bunch of Italian dudes like back in the day, 1990s, your relatives at the University of Parma in Italy, they were testing monkeys, and then they put electrodes in their brain. It's a terrible thing to do, but and then one of the researchers was reaching out to someone, or he was picking up his sandwich or whatever, and he realized that the same areas of his brain, the brain of the guy who was reaching out for whatever, were lighting up in the monkey's brain just by observing, because the monkey wasn't doing anything. So if a monkey is sitting still, not doing anything, there should not be activation of the premotor cortex, because the monkey is not moving, right? Think about that.
Yeah.
But by looking at someone's intention, by observing, not even the same species, man. It's we're all primates, okay, but we're looking at a monkey looking at a man. So those areas in the brain activated, which means that this is how we learn. Mammals in general, some birds also have mirror neurons, right? But mammals in general, especially primates and us, we are primates, right? We can learn by observing. So whatever someone is doing and the areas of their brain that are activating, we can also activate at of course, a lower degree, let's say, just by watching what they're doing. So when you said, when the kid sees the dad putting something in the closet, in the wardrobe, it's as if the same areas of the brain are activating. So then you can attach meaning to that, right? That's pretty cool, huh?
Yes, but there's only one thing though. Now I actually don't know how it works, because even though the same neural spots in the brain of the ape or the monkey is activated, but for some reason, they don't connect, because this is one of the biggest differences between us humans and primates, because they actually don't have the shared intention.
Exactly.
Even though their brains are activated, and now actually because this is one of the it's not my department here, it's your department. It's your monkey, you know.
It's my monkey, man. Yeah.
But I don't know, for some reason, the places, the neural spots are activated, but for some reason, they don't make the connection. Because Tomasello also did a fantastic experiment, and he taped it. If I'm not wrong, it's on YouTube. You can type Michael Tomasello experiments, etc. And if you don't find it on YouTube, you can find it on his website. You just Google Michael Tomasello, and you're going to be able to check a lot of his experiments, videos, etc., etc. But one of his experiments was with apes, and the whole thing was apes and babies. And the babies, they got some sort of candy whenever they worked together. So the whole point was there was a toy or a tool. I don't remember if it was a toy or a tool or something like that. And both babies had to work together, so both of them could get the candy. And also in the baby also played with an adult, and whenever the adult didn't perform accordingly, the baby would actually nag, like, "Hey, you're not doing it right. Do it right, because there's some treat for me." So that's shared intention. Like, hey, we have to work together because then both of us are going to be benefited. On the other hand, the apes, on the very same experiment, the apes couldn't work together. They couldn't team up. And mainly the alpha male, he was basically observing, watching the other monkey, and the other monkey, because he was by himself, he couldn't get the treat. Okay. And then the alpha male was like, okay, get out.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yes, because so they don't have this shared intention. They basically, of course, this is a very superficial statement from me, but they basically cannot manipulate one another. They don't have this ability. Of course they do, okay, but I'm not getting deeply into that. But basically they cannot do that like we do.
Yeah, we can do it in a sophisticated way, definitely.
Yes, in a more elaborate way.
Much more, yeah.
But that's what you said is really interesting, because yes, they have the spots activated, but for some reason they don't connect. The apes don't, the primates don't connect.
Sophisticated way.
You know, because they don't have that. Is this possible? Is it possible to have a part of our brain activated but without connection?
Well, I don't think that it's possible, because that's the thing. The way we can spot what's happening in the brain is when, in this case, they're using fMRI machines, right? It's when you have a certain blood flow that goes through that particular region, because it's going to use energy, it's going to actually spend some calories to do something. So it needs more oxygen and everything. But what you said makes sense in a way that we can do it in a much more sophisticated way than apes can. Because there was another experiment with apes that so you put 3 or 4 apes in different cages, and then only one of them, all of them get bananas, and they're all happy. And then only one of them keeps getting bananas, and the other ones, they look at it, and then they feel social pain because they've been rejected. After a couple of tries, they start getting very angry because they can see that what is happening is unfair, because the whatever, it's not even the alpha male, whichever ape is getting bananas, but they are not getting bananas anymore. So what is happening is, because they can visualize what is going on, the areas in the brain that are responsible for pain, so subcortical areas, some areas also in the cortex, they are lighting up, just like the babies did, if you think about it. babies start nagging because they see that they are not getting what they're supposed to. So those areas are going to, they are feeling social pain, right? They're feeling like they're rejected. And then again, that's how we can, look at somebody's face and look at body language and understand what's going on. Because we have an internal mechanism, which is, very, very closely related to the mirror systems, right? System, which is one, I guess, that tells us, okay, if somebody's doing that or acting that way or showing that facial expression, they're probably feeling like that, which means that for me to put myself in that person's shoes or for me to feel empathy, right, toward the person, I have to have some sort of mechanism to understand that even before I have speech, because I do have language, like body language, but I don't have speech. I cannot say the words, right?
Yes.
Which is incredible. So our brains rock, man.
Yes,
Dude.
it's super cool. And this whole thing that we've been saying is also in literature, not only in literature, but we call it catharsis. What's the state of catharsis?
Yeah.
When we put ourselves in the shoes of another person, and even though we're not there, it's not with us, we feel that. We can call it empathy, but catharsis is something more poetical. So whenever you're watching a movie, whenever you have a happy ending at the movie, and you feel glad, you feel, oh, that is
exactly.
so cool. That's catharsis.
Yes.
Whenever you're watching, I mentioned Hannibal Lecter, whenever you're watching a horror movie or a thriller, and you feel disgusted or you feel outraged, that's catharsis as well.
Terrified, yeah.
So that's catharsis.
Definitely. And it's the mirror system, man. That's all I wanted to say, yeah. But, okay, before anybody calls the myth of the mirror neural system or something like that, the myths about the mirror system. So this guy, I forgot his name, Koch. I'm sorry about the Koch part, but it's Hancock, whatever Koch system or something, that's his last name. I will do some digging and find out. So this is bad, so right?
This is so weird.
So
this is the weirdest episode ever, man.
Probably Hancock, whatever, or okay, I'll take a look. Yeah, Peacock, whatever. So this guy collected a lot of studies about the mirror neuron system, right? And then apparently there is evidence to support that they may not even exist. But, even Paul Howard Jones said that, it's part of his framework. So he believes it exists. So, I'm going with Paul. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that's a very nice side to choose.
Exactly.
And you know what? Of course, we've been talking about, I mentioned the $1 billion question a couple of minutes ago, like, whichever came first, the concept or the words. And there's some, and you said, yes, do thoughts have, is there an official language for thoughts, et cetera, the concepts, et cetera. And then you might think, well, but what about the words that we have in our minds, in our brains? And then I have to ask all of you guys that have been watching us both here on YouTube and on Facebook. And for those who are listening to us on Spotify, I also ask you, do we actually have words in our brains? Really?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because whenever I say the word mug, do you actually think about the word mug, like spelled M-U-G?
Yeah.
Or you think about the object. So, so we have to be very careful whenever we say, it's visual, etc., etc. I'm going to use the board, and I'm going to spell out the word on the board so that my students understand. Well, maybe, of course, if the whole objective of the class is to practice spelling, great, go for it. But if the whole point is to connect the dots, like to transfer the concept from from Portuguese that the students already have possessed, and they connect the concept to the language, which in our case is Portuguese. And now you want to make this connection with English or whatever second language you teach, then maybe the word spelled out on the board, maybe that's not going to be that effective. Maybe if you can draw a mug on the board, maybe this is going to be much more effective. And then that's why I asked you that question before, because when we do have some steps when we are drawing a language, the very first step that we have is the concept. We do have a concept. For example, mug or knife. What's a knife? Okay, a knife is made of metal and you cut things. And then based on this concept,
thank you, Pamela. Just Gregory Hickok. That's the name. The cock guy. Yeah, thank you.
And then from the concept of knife, then we're going to expand that into other categories. And then William Ronald Langacker, in one of his several books on neurocognitive linguistics, because I learned that cognitive linguistics is not a very nice term anymore. Now we have to I sound like a real scientist now. I'm a real scientist now.
Yeah,
Mom,
awesome.
are you proud of me, Mom, now?
And you know, Paul Howard Jones says everything neuro is sexy, right? So, you know, everybody watches the sessions with anything neuro,
So Ronald Langacker, in one of his books, he says that sometimes when you create schemas on the board, but not schemas for the language structure, but also for the concept, is sometimes whenever you do that, is sometimes it's more effective because we're dealing with concepts and not necessarily with words. Maybe the person, if we're teaching, for instance, adults, they already have the concept of a lot of linguistic things. They just don't know how to connect this concept to the real language, in this case, English. And then let's suppose an A1 or A2 student doesn't know the concept of put it up. Put something up, you know, and if you create some schemas on the board with concepts, and then all you got to do, so you trigger the concept, and then I already know this in the brain of our students. Okay, I know that, I know what it means, and then all you got to do is show the students the right order of the words. Put whatever up. So I got it. And then you're, especially with phrasal verbs, and then it's going to be easier to see, so you can use this one in this situation, that one is not very applicable in that situation, so on and so forth. I'm trying to remember the name of the book by Ronald Langacker, because I have like 3 books by Ronald Langacker, and sometimes I mix up the titles of the books. But later on, if you're very interested in knowing the name of the book, let me know, because I can tell you exactly the name of the book.
I'm going to ask Pamela to find out the name of the book, since she found out the name of the guy, the Hickok guy. Thank you very much. But you were talking about words in the brain. And so where do we store words in the brain? That's the big question. How do we recognize words, right? Because if you think about a word can be written down. So we have, we have form, we have use, we have meaning, we have the sound of the word, we have all of those things together, and they need to be in a way or in a place in the brain that they are connected, so that we can find those things. So we find one and then we find the rest. Otherwise, there's no much use for a word, right? So if I know how to spell something, but I don't know what it means or what it sounds like, so then I don't know language as I should, right? And if you look at some of the evidence we have, adults like our age, like in their 30s, up to 50s, So I was talking about me, obviously, right? Not with this beard, man. We look older with the beard. So we can probably we have stored in our cortex around 25,000, 30,000 words, which is pretty cool. But the coolest thing is that the more you grow, older, the more words you can actually store in your semantic memory. So you can go up to 50,000 words when you're 60 or 70. So if you are a reader, a bookworm, you can store a lot more words. And the process happens in a very interesting way because words, they normally take a second or less than a second to be pronounced, right? So whenever we have the stimulus coming at us, so if you say something and my brain is trying to pick up. So when you open your mouth to utter the first sound, my brain is going to try to find something that matches that. So it's kind of trying to predict what you're going to say. So if you say, I'm trying to find something that matches that I can put together, right?
Yeah.
And then as you keep pronouncing the word, then I start eliminating the stuff that doesn't make sense. And then I'm going to have to access a lot of neuronal networks because I don't know what the hell you're talking about. So if you say something that has several meanings with no context, like get, right? If you say get, holy moly, then. I mean, get needs like 3 pages in the dictionary, right? So I have no idea what you mean. But then if you say, as part of a sentence, that I need to get something, I understand exactly what you mean because then it's part of the context. There's meaning, there's use, there's form, everything is together. And then when we learn a new word, we're going to store this new word somewhere. Let me show the brain again in our subcortical area.
Can I baptize your brain?
Hannibal, please.
Hannibal.
I love it.
I think it's Hannibal.
Especially
because Anna said he needs to give it a name.
So this is going to be awesome. I had a very weird dream with Sir Anthony Hopkins a couple of weeks ago.
You told me
that was weird. He was speaking Russian. So Hannibal. So you baptized the brain, man. Thank you very much, Hannibal. So inside Hannibal's temporal lobe here, you should see a structure called hippocampus that I talk about it all the time. That's where we first store, conceptual semantic memory, right? Because that's the thing. We have different memory systems. So we do have space in our brains. It's somewhere, all over the cortex to store things that mean something like, that we can verbalize. That's why we call it declarative memory. So, but that's the thing. One word is attached to a lot of things in our brain. So it's not like a little tiny spot or box inside a certain area of your brain. It's actually like a huge network because, I have get, and I know that get sounds like this, that it spells like this, and it means this and this and this and this, and in this context, it means this and this. So it's a huge network of things. So that's why do you only have like the written word in your brain? No, you have a huge network of things, man.
And you know what? This exact same thing you have just said is part of one of John Bybee's works. Her name is Joan Bybee, B-Y-B-E-E. And actually, in one of her studies, she says, hopefully I'm not wrong, she says that we take around 0.3 milliseconds to recognize a word. 0.3 milliseconds. And how does that work? It's exactly what you said. Because whenever a person is starting to say something, and of course, all the sounds are linked. Some of the sounds are cut off. Other sounds don't exist. So whenever the words are all together, the sounds, whenever the sounds are all together, entrenched in etc. What our brains do is, wait a minute, this combination combination of words is not part of this language. So
Exactly.
that's why, I'll give you an example. If I say, put it here, put it.
Yeah.
We do have links, sounds that are linked here. Put it. Okay.
Yeah.
And then our brain is like, okay, so put it. Put it.
Yeah.
Put it.
Yeah.
What kind of sequence do we have here? Why do I know that the person is saying put it and not
Yeah.
put it?
Yes.
That's weird. That came out really weird.
Well, I said the cough
Really
thing,
weird.
so you're good. You're
That came
okay.
out really weird. I'm so sorry. That's the most
In ourselves today. So
Yeah,
thank you.
I'm so sorry for that. That came out super weird, but you know,
Yeah.
because the brain knows that
Yeah.
poof, just the sequence poof is not necessarily a word, and the other sequence that I'm not going to repeat here because it came out
Yeah.
weird, and the
Yeah.
other sequence, no, it's not going to make any sense. So it has to be put it for some reason in our
Exactly.
brains. Put it. So put
Yeah.
it. All right. So
Yeah.
that's what our brain does. So they are going to eliminate, and this happens in 0.3 milliseconds. 0.3
Exactly.
milliseconds. It's like when we blink in 0.3
Yeah.
milliseconds. You know.
Yeah.
So at the blink of an eye, we understand, or actually we start grasping whatever the person is trying to tell us, whatever the person is telling us. With
Definitely.
what we've been doing here, not with the words, because we're struggling with specific words here today.
Yes.
But
But that's it, Ben.
and then you might ask us, Andre, Rudy, what does that mean? What does that have to do with visual aspects, with
Yeah.
being exposed to scenarios and etc. and etc.? Well, once again, remember what we said in the very beginning. Whenever we are seeing something, there's a big
Yeah.
chance that no, but the brains are going to be activated, and there's a big chance that we're actually going to learn something. And in this
Definitely.
case, for instance, in the case of language, whenever we're seeing a person, even if the person doesn't say a word, the person is getting a box from the ground and putting the box up on the shelf. Just the movement, the baby, the person is going to, in the brain, the baby is going to connect the dots and think, okay, so subject A is acting
Yeah.
on an object,
Yeah.
and this object is leaving the zero state and going to state number one.
Exactly.
So that's a concept. This is a concept. This is
Perfect,
a
man.
concept. And what we're doing then is inserting some words in it. And then this
Definitely.
whole concept is going to be put it up here.
Yeah. And you said it. What does that have to do with visual learning? So remember, let's not think about visual learners, because everybody's a visual learner. Everybody's an auditory learner. But we do know that the most primal way of learning is by, basically attaching meaning or using symbology to understand the world, to understand the things that we see in our immediate surrounding, or the things that we hear in our immediate surrounding. So when you get the description or the definition of a term in English, that's very abstract. Remember that that's the last thing we can do in evolutionary terms, because we're indexes, icons, and then symbology. So that's the hardest thing. That's why, if I need to understand what a word means, and I go to, Oxford dictionary or whatever, and I read the description of that word, that's very abstract, and it requires a lot of higher order thinking skills for me to be able to put those things together. But if I see somebody doing what that means, that's not abstract at all. That's very concrete. And I'm using my visual competencies, right? I'm using my visual skills. And when you said pantomiming, that reminded me of, theater and plays. So if you go back in the day when we had silent movies or theater, Charlie Chaplin, for example, miming his way through. We can understand the story with not a single word. We can understand what's going on because we can see what he's doing there. And it also brought me back to my teacher, Mike. When I was taking English classes, I don't know, like 10 years old or whatever. And nobody could understand the meaning of release, to release. And then he went there and he got whatever that was on a desk. So it was like a piece of plastic or whatever. And he said, I'm holding the plastic, okay? Now I'm going to release. And then he opened his hand and, and that's how there. And he got meaning to that. And that's how we learned, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Dude, I think we have 2 minutes.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Chris.
And Chris, yeah.
Chris asked us, English speakers learn a lot from what's called sight words because they don't have a strict pronunciation rule. Would it work for us? Dude, I think yes. 2 minutes. But I don't know if you were here from the very beginning, Chris. What you can do is not necessarily spell out the word on the board, okay? Maybe you can draw something. Maybe you can use body language because depending on the situation, of course, the pronunciation is going to be the frosting on the top of the cake. First, you have to activate the concept. And to activate the concept, maybe you don't need to spell it out on the board. Maybe you can use gestures, as Andre just mentioned a couple of seconds ago. You can write schemas. If it's a word, you can write definitions because this is going to activate their concept. And then later on, you're going to work on the pronunciation, and then you're going to practice this drill, this word that you mentioned with the class, with the group. Yes, it would work.
Definitely. Yeah, I think, the message.
We have 1 minute, right?
Yeah, so to wrap up, the final message is the brain requires a lot less effort to understand visual cues than abstract things, So if you think about higher order thinking skills, they require the usage of the prefrontal cortex, and we have 30 seconds now. So instead of telling people what it is, show them what it is. And then they're going to learn much more easily. Higher order thinking skills, they require the usage of the prefrontal cortex, and we have 30 seconds now. So instead of telling